April 15, 1942, Camp O'Donnell, Luzon, Philippines. The Japanese camp reports would never fully document what Colonel Tsuneyoshi witnessed that morning. 78,000 American and Filipino prisoners, survivors of a 65-mile death march through tropical heat, forming precise military formations that defied everything the Imperial Army understood about defeated enemies. Through the barbed wire perimeter, Japanese guards watched exhausted men who should have been broken individuals instead moving as coordinated units. No shouted orders, no visible signals between scattered groups of prisoners. Yet Americans from different regiments, different states, men who had never served together, aligned themselves into perfect ranks with timing that seemed impossible after 5 days of forced marching without adequate food or water. Colonel Tsuneyoshi had overseen prisoner camps across Manchuria, Burma, and the Dutch East Indies. In every conquered territory, defeated soldiers became collections of desperate individuals focused solely on personal survival. Military discipline evaporated within hours of surrender. Officers abandoned their men. Enlisted personnel ignored rank structures that no longer protected them. The Americans were operating under principles the Japanese had never encountered. While guards expected to manage 12,000 broken men through intimidation and random punishment, they faced military units that somehow maintained chain of command despite capture. The 200th Coast Artillery maintained formation integrity. Tank crews from the 192nd Battalion responded to unspoken signals from commanders who technically no longer held authority. Japanese doctrine assumed surrender meant psychological defeat. Every previous campaign had validated this belief. French prisoners in Indochina had required minimal guards. Dutch forces in Java had offered no organized resistance after capitulation. British troops in Hong Kong had shown predictable demoralization patterns. But 8,000 miles from Detroit's assembly lines and Hollywood's movie studios, the most confounding challenge to Japanese military psychology was revealing itself. Not in superior weapons or tactical brilliance, but in the invisible bonds connecting American soldiers in ways the Imperial Army had never imagined possible after defeat. Colonel James V. Collier, the senior American officer at Camp O'Donnell, had never officially been appointed prisoner commander. Under normal circumstances, his authority ended the moment Japanese forces accepted the surrender at Bataan. Yet within 72 hours of arrival, every American prisoner, regardless of service branch, rank, or previous unit assignment, recognized his command authority through invisible chains of military protocol that baffled their captors. Japanese camp administrators expected to manage individual prisoners through direct control. Their intake procedures focused on breaking existing military relationships by separating officers from enlisted men, mixing units, and eliminating rank-based privileges. These methods had proven effective across Southeast Asia, where captured colonial forces quickly fragmented into manageable groups of isolated individuals seeking personal survival. The American response violated every principle of prisoner psychology the Japanese had observed. Within the first week, Colonel Collier had established a complete military hierarchy that operated parallel to Japanese camp administration. Major William Dice assumed responsibility for morale and discipline. Captain Albert Fields coordinated medical care among the scattered Army Air Corps personnel. Lieutenant Colonel Jack Schwartz organized work detail assignments to minimize prisoner casualties while maintaining the appearance of compliance. This shadow command structure functioned through protocols invisible to Japanese guards. When Colonel Collier entered any area of the camp, enlisted men snapped to attention despite Japanese regulations forbidding military courtesy between prisoners. Officers continued holding morning briefings disguised as casual conversations. Work details formed with mathematical precision that suggested pre-planned coordination rather than random assignment. Japanese intelligence reports to Manila headquarters described unusual prisoner behavior patterns that defied standard camp management procedures. Camp Commandant Colonel Yoshio Tsuneyoshi requisitioned additional interpreters, believing language barriers prevented proper communication of orders. When translation proved adequate, he requested psychological evaluation teams, suspecting mental illness among prisoners who maintained military bearing despite obvious defeat. The technical execution of American military hierarchy impressed even skeptical Japanese observers. Information flowed through established channels with efficiency that suggested sophisticated communication networks. Medical emergencies received coordinated responses that indicated pre-positioned personnel and resources. Disciplinary issues resolved themselves through internal mechanisms that required no Japanese intervention. Captain Albert Fields demonstrated this organizational capability during the camp's first medical crisis. When dysentery struck 200 prisoners simultaneously, Fields coordinated treatment protocols using 3 Navy corpsmen, 2 Army medics, and one Air Corps flight surgeon who had concealed his medical background during initial processing. They established isolation procedures, rationed precious medical supplies acquired through covert prisoner trading networks, and maintained detailed patient records hidden from Japanese inspection. Japanese medical personnel observed this response with growing concern. Their own military doctrine emphasized rigid hierarchy maintained through formal authority structures. The idea that defeated soldiers could maintain equivalent coordination through voluntary compliance challenged fundamental assumptions about military psychology and prisoner management. Lieutenant Colonel Schwartz's work detail organization revealed another dimension of maintained American military culture. Rather than competing for easier assignments, prisoners rotated through the most dangerous tasks according to systematic schedules that distributed risk evenly across ranks. Construction crews building Japanese airfield facilities included officers performing manual labor alongside enlisted men, violating every Japanese understanding of military class structure. The most disturbing aspect for Japanese administrators was the Americans' adherence to military regulations that no longer provided protection. Officers continued refusing to reveal tactical information during interrogations, citing Geneva Convention articles despite Japanese refusal to recognize these protections. Enlisted men maintained military courtesy toward superiors who possessed no authority to provide rewards or protection. Medical personnel treated Japanese guards with professional detachment while secretly documenting injuries inflicted on fellow prisoners. Colonel Tsuneyoshi's weekly reports to 14th Army Headquarters revealed mounting frustration with American prisoner management. Standard intimidation techniques failed to break command relationships. Isolation punishment produced no intelligence breakthroughs. Physical punishment of officers generated coordinated prisoner responses that suggested sophisticated communication and planning capabilities. The psychological impact on Japanese personnel deepened as they realized their fundamental miscalculation. Guards trained to manage defeated individuals found themselves supervising military units that maintained fighting effectiveness despite capture. Administrative staff designed to process broken prisoners confronted organizational structures that required constant adaptation of security procedures. Major William Dice embodied this challenge through his daily interactions with Japanese authority. Despite weighing 40 pounds less than his pre-capture weight, Dice maintained command presence that unnerved guards accustomed to managing demoralized prisoners. His morning inspections of American prisoner areas proceeded with military formality that suggested ongoing combat readiness rather than captive resignation. Japanese intelligence analysis struggled to explain American behavior through existing frameworks for understanding defeated enemies. Their reports noted unusual prisoner coordination but attributed it to individual leadership rather than systematic military culture. This misunderstanding would prove catastrophic as Japanese forces encountered similar American organizational capabilities throughout the Pacific Campaign. The reality emerging at Camp O'Donnell contradicted Japanese strategic assumptions about American military character. Rather than individualistic soldiers held together by external discipline, they had captured military professionals whose training created internal motivation systems that survived capture, defeat, and brutal treatment. This organizational resilience suggested broader American military capabilities that Japanese planners had never anticipated. Within 3 weeks of the camp's operation, Colonel Tsuneyoshi requested additional security personnel and revised containment procedures. His justification cited prisoner behavior inconsistent with standard defeat patterns and recommended enhanced surveillance of American military personnel in future operations. The request revealed growing Japanese recognition that their expectations about American psychological vulnerability had proven dangerously inaccurate. The discovery occurred by accident. On May 3, 1942, Japanese guards conducting routine barracks inspection at Cabanatuan found a hand-drawn schematic hidden inside a prisoner's mess kit. The drawing depicted radio circuit diagrams with component specifications that matched no equipment officially present in the camp. Intelligence officers analyzing the document realized American prisoners had been operating clandestine communication networks using components scavenged from destroyed military equipment and civilian radios, confiscated during camp establishment. Technical analysis revealed sophisticated engineering knowledge that Japanese security had completely underestimated. The circuit design utilized variable capacitors salvaged from automotive radios, transformers extracted from damaged field telephones, and vacuum tubes hidden during the initial prisoner processing. More disturbing was the realization that multiple prisoners possessed the technical expertise to construct, operate, and maintain these devices without detection. Arthur Lascano, a Filipino-American Navy electronics technician, had established the camp's primary communication node within 2 weeks of arrival. His background in submarine communications provided knowledge of frequency management and signal propagation that proved invaluable for maintaining contact with Manila resistance networks. Working with 3 Army Signal Corps technicians and 1 Marine radio operator, Lascano's team assembled receivers capable of intercepting Japanese military communications while monitoring Allied broadcasts from Australia. The technical specifications of their operations impressed even Japanese signals intelligence personnel, who eventually documented the network. Operating frequencies between 6.0 and 18.0 MHz provided optimal propagation characteristics for long-distance communication across the Philippine archipelago. Power output limited to 2 to 3 watts prevented Japanese direction-finding equipment from detecting transmission sources. Crystal-controlled frequency stability, achieved using quartz components salvaged from damaged aircraft radios, ensured reliable communication schedules with external resistance groups. Information distribution within the camp utilized human networks that exploited Japanese security blind spots. News bulletins received through radio intercepts were transcribed onto rice paper using improvised carbon extracted from burned wood. These documents circulated through work details, medical queues, and meal distribution lines using predetermined hand signals and coded conversations that Japanese interpreters failed to recognize as intelligence traffic. Japanese security procedures proved inadequate for detecting American communication sophistication. Guards trained to find obvious contraband missed technical components disguised as personal items. Radio tubes appeared as broken medicine bottles. Copper wire became bootlace repairs. Capacitors masqueraded as uniform buttons. The systematic nature of this deception suggested coordination that Japanese administrators attributed to individual initiative, rather than organized technical intelligence operations. Work detail assignments provided opportunities for systematic sabotage that Japanese supervisors initially dismissed as incompetence or equipment failure. American prisoners assigned to Clark Airfield construction projects implemented coordinated delays that reduced completion schedules by 30% without triggering obvious disciplinary responses. Concrete mixing procedures subtly altered to reduce structural integrity. Electrical installations modified to create systematic failures weeks after Japanese inspection approval. Lascano's most significant sabotage operation targeted Japanese naval supply operations at Manila Bay. Assigned to stevedore workloading submarine components, he identified critical equipment shipments through document observation and technical knowledge of Navy logistics systems. His team systematically damaged precision instruments by introducing metal filings into bearing assemblies, contaminated fuel additives with water, and mislabeled component specifications to ensure installation failures during submarine maintenance operations. The technical execution of these sabotage operations demonstrated American industrial knowledge that Japanese intelligence had never anticipated among combat personnel. Prisoners understood manufacturing tolerances, quality control procedures, and system integration principles that enabled sophisticated equipment degradation. Their actions suggested broader American military training that emphasized technical competence across specialties rather than narrow job-specific skills Japanese forces possessed. Japanese factory supervisors began reporting unusual equipment failure rates at facilities utilizing American prisoner labor. Automotive repair shops experienced systematic tool breakage. Aircraft maintenance facilities discovered precision instruments requiring frequent recalibration. Construction projects suffered foundation problems that appeared months after completion. The pattern suggested coordinated technical sabotage rather than random prisoner resistance. Communication between separate prison camps revealed organizational capabilities that violated Japanese understanding of prisoner isolation procedures. Information about guard rotation schedules, prisoner transfers, and Japanese military movements circulated between facilities separated by hundreds of miles. Intelligence reports from different camps contained consistent details that indicated sophisticated information-sharing networks operating beyond Japanese surveillance capabilities. The revelation of intercamp communication emerged during interrogation of prisoners recaptured after escape attempts. Under questioning, escapees revealed knowledge of conditions at camps they had never visited, guard personnel they had never encountered, and Japanese military operations conducted far from their detention locations. This information could only have originated from organized intelligence networks that Japanese security had failed to detect or disrupt. Technical analysis of captured communication equipment revealed American engineering improvisation that impressed Japanese specialists. Radio components fabricated from salvaged materials demonstrated manufacturing techniques that suggested extensive technical education among military personnel. Circuit designs incorporated redundancy features that prevented total communication failure if individual components were discovered. Operating procedures included security protocols that minimized exposure during transmission periods. Japanese counterintelligence operations struggled to penetrate American communication networks despite intensive surveillance efforts. Language barriers limited effectiveness of intercepted conversations. Cultural differences prevented Japanese personnel from recognizing American communication patterns disguised as casual interaction. The depth of technical knowledge displayed by prisoners exceeded expectations based on Japanese military training standards that emphasized specialized rather than broad-based technical education. By August 1942, Japanese intelligence reports documented systematic prisoner coordination that defied standard captivity management procedures. Communication networks maintained operational effectiveness despite security crackdowns. Sabotage operations continued despite enhanced supervision of work details. Information flow between camps persisted despite transportation security measures designed to prevent prisoner contact. The psychological impact on Japanese administrators deepened as they recognized the sophistication of American technical operations. Guards trained to manage demoralized prisoners found themselves supervising coordinated intelligence networks. Security personnel designed to prevent escape attempts confronted systematic sabotage operations that demonstrated advanced technical knowledge and organizational capability. Colonel Tsuneyoshi's intelligence reports to Manila headquarters revealed mounting concern about American prisoner capabilities. His assessments noted unusual technical competence and sophisticated coordination that suggested broader American military preparation than Japanese planners had anticipated. The reports recommended enhanced security measures and specialized personnel trained to counter technical sabotage operations. The documentation of American communication networks provided Japanese intelligence with their first comprehensive analysis of American military technical training. The sophistication of prisoner operations suggested systematic technical education that prepared personnel for independent operations under adverse conditions. This capability indicated broader American military effectiveness that extended beyond conventional combat operations to sustained resistance activities. The emergence of coordinated sabotage operations forced Japanese administrators to acknowledge fundamental miscalculations about American military character and capability. Rather than managing broken individuals seeking personal survival, they confronted organized military units, maintaining operational effectiveness through sophisticated technical means. This realization foreshadowed broader recognition of American capabilities that would reshape Japanese strategic assessments throughout the Pacific Campaign. The prisoner behavior that confounded Japanese administrators at Camp O'Donnell reflected industrial and cultural realities that imperial planners had fundamentally misunderstood. While Japanese intelligence focused on American military equipment specifications and troop deployment numbers, they had missed the broader transformation of American society that produced soldiers capable of maintaining organizational effectiveness under conditions that broke other armies. American military training in 1941 differed fundamentally from Japanese approaches that emphasized rigid hierarchy and unquestioning obedience. The Civilian Conservation Corps had trained 2.5 million young Americans in technical skills, problem-solving, and independent decision-making between 1933 and 1941. Industrial employment in defense plants had exposed another 12 million Americans to precision manufacturing, quality control procedures, and systematic troubleshooting methods that became second nature to an entire generation. Japanese strategic assessments had calculated American industrial capacity in terms of raw production numbers, steel tonnage, aircraft manufacturing rates, shipyard output, but failed to grasp how this industrial culture shaped American military personnel. The average American soldier possessed technical knowledge equivalent to specialized Japanese military technicians. Basic mechanical training that Japanese forces reserved for select personnel was standard education for American civilians entering military service. The technical sophistication displayed by prisoners at Cabanatuan and Camp O'Donnell represented broader American educational and industrial development that Japanese planners had never experienced firsthand. American high school graduates understood electrical circuits, mechanical systems, and chemical processes that required specialized training in Japanese educational systems. This knowledge base enabled improvisation and adaptation that Japanese military doctrine considered impossible without formal technical education. Production statistics revealed the magnitude of American capabilities that Japanese intelligence had underestimated. In 1942, American factories produced 47,836 aircraft, while Japanese production totaled 8,861 units. American shipyards launched 746 vessels compared to Japanese construction of 68 ships. More significantly, American industrial processes emphasize modular design, standardized components, and field maintenance capabilities that enabled sustained operations across global distances. The cultural implications of these production methods shaped American military personnel in ways Japanese forces never anticipated. American soldiers understood supply chain management, logistics coordination, and resource optimization as natural extensions of civilian experience. The systematic approach to problem solving that enabled efficient mass production also created military personnel capable of maintaining organization and effectiveness under extreme conditions. Japanese military culture emphasized collective action achieved through rigid discipline imposed by superior authority. Individual initiative was discouraged as potentially disruptive to group harmony and hierarchical control. This cultural framework led Japanese planners to assume that American military effectiveness depended entirely on external command structures that would collapse when those structures were removed through defeat and capture. The prisoner networks at Camp O'Donnell demonstrated the opposite reality. American military effectiveness derived from internalized values and technical competence that operated independently of formal authority structures. Soldiers maintained coordination through shared cultural understanding rather than imposed discipline. This capability reflected broader American social development that emphasized individual responsibility within cooperative frameworks. Intelligence reports from Japanese-occupied territories consistently noted American prisoner behavior as anomalous compared to other captured forces. British prisoners in Hong Kong had shown predictable demoralization patterns. Dutch colonial forces in Java had fragmented into competing groups focused on personal survival. French prisoners in Indochina had offered minimal resistance to Japanese administration. Only American prisoners maintained systematic organization that required constant security adaptation. The economic implications of prisoner resistance forced Japanese administrators to allocate resources they could not afford to waste. Camp O'Donnell required triple the guard personnel initially planned. Construction projects utilizing prisoner labor experienced delays that demanded additional supervisory staff. Work details needed enhanced security measures that reduced productive output while increasing administrative costs. American industrial training had prepared military personnel for exactly these circumstances through emphasis on efficiency, resource conservation, and systematic planning. Civilian employment in American factories taught workers to identify bottlenecks, eliminate waste, and optimize processes for maximum output. These skills transferred directly to prisoner situations where Americans systematically reduced Japanese operational efficiency while conserving their own resources. The psychological foundation of American prisoner behavior reflected cultural values that Japanese strategic planners had misinterpreted as weakness. American emphasis on individual rights and democratic participation created soldiers who maintained personal initiative even under authoritarian control. Japanese analysts had assumed this individualism would prevent collective action, failing to understand that shared values enabled coordination without external enforcement. Military procurement statistics illustrated American logistical capabilities that supported sustained global operations Japanese forces could never match. In 1942, American military expenditures totaled $49 billion compared to Japanese spending of $4.8 billion. More importantly, American logistics systems maintained supply lines across 6,000 miles of Pacific Ocean, while Japanese supply chains struggled to support operations 1,500 miles from home bases. The technical knowledge displayed by American prisoners reflected broader educational investments that Japanese society had never prioritized. American public education included technical training, scientific methodology, and practical problem solving that prepared citizens for industrial participation. Japanese education emphasized classical learning and social conformity that produced excellent soldiers but limited technical innovators. Manufacturing experience shaped American military personnel in ways that proved decisive in prisoner situations. Workers familiar with assembly line production understood systematic coordination, quality control, and process improvement. Veterans of American industrial employment could organize complex operations using minimal resources while maintaining high effectiveness standards that frustrated Japanese security measures. The strategic miscalculation extended beyond prisoner management to broader assumptions about American military capability. If defeated American soldiers could maintain sophisticated organization and technical operations under brutal conditions, active American military units possessed capabilities Japanese forces had never anticipated. The prisoner resistance foreshadowed broader American tactical and strategic advantages that would emerge throughout the Pacific Campaign. Japanese intelligence assessments began acknowledging American organizational capabilities that exceeded initial estimates. Reports noted unusual prisoner coordination and sophisticated technical knowledge. but failed to grasp the broader implications for active combat operations. The systematic underestimation of American capabilities would prove catastrophic as Japanese forces encountered American industrial and military effectiveness across the Pacific theater. Resource allocation problems created by prisoner resistance revealed Japanese logistical weaknesses that American industrial capacity could exploit. Every additional guard required for prisoner security reduced available personnel for combat operations. Enhanced security measures at work sites decreased productive output needed for military operations. Administrative complexity of managing American prisoners diverted personnel from strategic planning and tactical preparation. The cultural divide became apparent through Japanese attempts to apply traditional Asian concepts of honor and shame to American prisoners. Japanese administrators expected public humiliation to break American morale and eliminate resistance. Instead, Americans maintained collective identity through shared values that operated independently of external validation. This cultural resilience reflected broader American social development that emphasized internal motivation rather than social conformity. Production capacity comparisons illustrated the magnitude of American advantages that Japanese planners had underestimated. American steel production in 1942 totaled 84 million tons compared to Japanese output of 7 million tons. American aluminum production exceeded Japanese capacity by ratios of 15.1. These materials advantages translated directly into military equipment superiority that supported sustained global operations Japanese forces could never match. The revelation of American prisoner capabilities forced Japanese strategic reassessment of broader military assumptions. If captured American soldiers possessed such sophisticated technical knowledge and organizational ability, active American military units represented threats Japanese tactical doctrine had never addressed. The prisoner resistance provided early evidence of American military effectiveness that would reshape Japanese strategic planning throughout the Pacific Campaign. By December 1942, Japanese intelligence reports acknowledged systematic American capabilities that contradicted initial strategic assumptions. Prisoner behavior demonstrated technical competence, organizational effectiveness, and cultural resilience that suggested broader American military advantages Japanese forces were unprepared to counter. These realizations marked the beginning of Japanese recognition that their fundamental assessment of American military character had been catastrophically wrong. The breaking point came on January 30, 1945, during the liberation of Cabanatuan. Japanese intelligence intercepted American radio transmissions coordinating the rescue operation and discovered that prisoners inside the camp had been providing detailed intelligence to the 6th Ranger Battalion for weeks. Camp blueprints, guard rotation schedules, and defensive positions had been systematically transmitted through communication networks that Japanese security had never detected despite 3 years of intensive surveillance. Colonel Tsuneyoshi's final intelligence report, filed hours before evacuating Camp O'Donnell, contained admissions that shattered fundamental Japanese assumptions about prisoner psychology. American captives maintain military organization equivalent to active combat units. Standard containment procedures have proven ineffective. Prisoners demonstrate technical capabilities and coordination that exceed expectations for defeated personnel. The psychological transformation of Japanese personnel assigned to American prisoner facilities became apparent through medical reports documenting stress-related disorders among guards and administrators. Captain Hiroshi Yamamoto, medical officer at Cabanatuan, noted unprecedented rates of anxiety, depression, and paranoid behavior among Japanese staff. Guards reported feeling constantly observed and outmaneuvered by prisoners they were supposed to control. Administrative personnel experienced recurring nightmares about prisoner escape attempts and sabotage operations that suggested systematic psychological pressure from sustained exposure to organized American resistance. The most shocking revelation emerged during post-liberation interrogation of Japanese camp personnel. Intelligence officers discovered that American prisoners had been systematically documenting war crimes, collecting evidence, and maintaining detailed records of Japanese atrocities through hidden archives that survived multiple security sweeps. These records included photographs, witness statements, and technical documentation that would later support war crimes prosecutions. The sophistication of this evidence collection suggested legal knowledge and organizational planning that Japanese administrators had never suspected. Guard rotation policies required constant modification as Japanese personnel requested transfers away from American prisoner facilities. Standard tour lengths of 6 months were reduced to 3 months, then 2 months, as psychological evaluations revealed declining effectiveness among security staff. The most experienced guards, veterans of campaigns across Southeast Asia, reported that American prisoners were fundamentally different from other captive populations and required constant vigilance that proved mentally exhausting. Intelligence assessments from multiple prison camps revealed coordinated prisoner activities that operated across the entire Philippine archipelago. Information sharing between facilities separated by hundreds of miles demonstrated communication capabilities that Japanese signals intelligence could never fully penetrate. Escape attempts showed coordination with Filipino guerrilla forces that indicated ongoing military planning and strategic thinking among prisoners supposed to be broken and demoralized. The technical sophistication of prisoner operations forced Japanese military intelligence to acknowledge capabilities they had never encountered in other theaters. American prisoners understood electronics, mechanical systems, and organizational procedures that enabled sustained resistance operations despite brutal treatment and inadequate resources. This technical knowledge suggested broader American military training that prepared personnel for independent operations under conditions that would paralyze forces trained for conventional warfare. Major General Yoshitaka Kawashima, commanding Japanese forces in the Philippines, received intelligence briefings in late 1944 that fundamentally altered his assessment of American military character. Prisoner behavior reports indicated organizational resilience, technical competence, and strategic thinking that contradicted every assumption about the psychological impact of defeat and captivity. These revelations coincided with mounting evidence of American industrial and military capabilities that suggested Japanese strategic planning had been based on catastrophic underestimation. The psychological impact on Japanese leadership extended beyond prison camp management to broader strategic reassessment. If defeated American soldiers maintained such sophisticated organization and resistance capability, active American military units possessed advantages that Japanese tactical doctrine had never addressed. The prisoner evidence suggested American military effectiveness that operated independently of equipment superiority or numerical advantage. Administrative records from Japanese headquarters revealed mounting concern about American prisoner management costs and security requirements. Resources dedicated to maintaining control over American captives increased throughout the war, while effectiveness of containment measures declined. Camp security absorbed personnel needed for combat operations while producing minimal intelligence value or psychological leverage against American forces. The most disturbing realization for Japanese commanders was the recognition that standard intimidation techniques proved counterproductive when applied to American prisoners. Physical punishment generated coordinated responses that demonstrated ongoing military organization. Psychological pressure tactics backfired by strengthening prisoner solidarity rather than breaking individual resistance. Isolation procedures failed because Americans maintained group identity through shared values that operated independently of physical contact. Japanese medical personnel documented unusual prisoner health patterns that violated expectations about captivity stress. Despite inadequate nutrition and brutal treatment, American prisoners maintained psychological stability that enabled continued resistance activities. Medical examinations revealed evidence of systematic exercise, health maintenance, and mutual support that suggested military discipline remained operational despite Japanese efforts to break prisoner morale. Intelligence intercepts revealed American prisoner communications that demonstrated detailed knowledge of Japanese military operations, strategic planning, and logistical capabilities. This information could only have been acquired through systematic observation and analysis that indicated ongoing intelligence operations conducted by personnel supposed to be defeated and broken. The sophistication of prisoner intelligence gathering suggested broader American military training that emphasized adaptability and independent thinking. The final shock came through Japanese recognition that prisoner resistance had been systematically degrading their operational effectiveness throughout the Philippines campaign. Construction delays, equipment failures, and security requirements had absorbed resources and personnel that could have been deployed against active American forces. The cumulative impact of prisoner resistance represented strategic victory achieved through means Japanese military doctrine had never anticipated or prepared to counter. Post-war interviews with Japanese commanders revealed the psychological trauma of discovering that their fundamental assumptions about American military character had been completely wrong. They had expected to capture broken individuals seeking personal survival and instead had imprisoned organized military units that maintained fighting effectiveness under conditions that would have destroyed other armies. This realization marked the moment when Japanese leadership began to understand the magnitude of their strategic miscalculation. Colonel Tsuneyoshi's personal diary, recovered after the war, contained entries that revealed his growing recognition of American military superiority. These prisoners demonstrate capabilities that suggest we have fundamentally misunderstood American military culture. Their organization, technical knowledge, and resistance capabilities indicate broader American advantages we never anticipated. If captured soldiers maintain such effectiveness, what capabilities do active American forces possess? The psychological impact of this recognition extended throughout Japanese military hierarchy as commanders realized their strategic planning had been based on catastrophically flawed assumptions about American military effectiveness. The prisoner evidence suggested American capabilities that operate independently of material advantages and indicated cultural and organizational superiorities that Japanese forces could never match. By early 1945, Japanese intelligence reports acknowledged that American prisoner behavior had provided early evidence of broader American military capabilities that would prove decisive throughout the Pacific Campaign. The systematic underestimation of American organizational effectiveness, technical competence, and cultural resilience had shaped Japanese strategic planning in ways that proved catastrophic when confronted with the reality of sustained American military operations across the Pacific theater. The shocking realization that Japanese forces had captured not broken individuals but organized military units capable of sustained resistance operations marked a fundamental shift in Japanese understanding of American military character and capability. The vindication came at 1930 hours on January 30, 1945, when the first American Rangers breached the Cabanatuan perimeter. The 513 surviving prisoners didn't scatter in confusion or panic as Japanese defenders expected. Instead, they moved with coordinated precision that demonstrated 3 years of maintained military organization had prepared them for exactly this moment. Within minutes, former prisoners had assumed tactical positions, provided covering fire, and executed evacuation procedures that enabled the rescue of every survivor without a single American casualty. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Mucci, commanding the 6th Ranger Battalion, filed after-action reports that documented prisoner coordination capabilities that exceeded his unit's expectations. Rescued personnel provided detailed intelligence on Japanese defensive positions, guard rotations, and tactical vulnerabilities that could only have been acquired through systematic observation and analysis. The Rangers discovered that prisoners had maintained complete situational awareness throughout their captivity and were prepared to support liberation operations with military effectiveness that contradicted every assumption about the psychological impact of prolonged captivity. The strategic intelligence value of liberated prisoners shocked American military commanders who had expected to recover demoralized survivors requiring extensive rehabilitation. Instead, they obtained detailed information about Japanese military operations, industrial capabilities, and strategic planning that had been systematically collected and preserved through sophisticated prisoner intelligence networks. This information provided crucial insights that supported final Pacific Campaign operations and demonstrated that American prisoners had maintained operational effectiveness throughout their captivity. Post-war interrogations of Japanese commanders revealed the long-term psychological impact of managing American prisoners. Major General Masaharu Homa, who had overseen the initial Bataan operations, admitted during war crimes proceedings that American prisoner behavior had forced fundamental reassessment of Japanese strategic assumptions about American military character. The organized resistance, technical competence, and sustained morale of American captives had provided early evidence of broader American capabilities that Japanese planners had catastrophically underestimated. The influence of prisoner resistance on Japanese resource allocation became apparent through captured logistical records that documented increasing security requirements for American prisoner facilities. By 1944, camps housing American prisoners required guard-to-prisoner ratios 3 times higher than facilities containing other nationalities. Construction projects utilizing American prisoner labor experienced systematic delays that forced Japanese commanders to reassign combat personnel to supervisory roles. The cumulative effect represented strategic victory achieved through means that traditional military doctrine had never anticipated. American military doctrine underwent fundamental revision based on prisoner experiences in Japanese camps. The Uniform Code of Military Justice, adopted in 1950, incorporated lessons learned from prisoner resistance operations. The Code of Conduct for Armed Forces, established in 1955, reflected recognition that American military personnel possessed capabilities for sustained resistance that required formal acknowledgement and support. Survival, evasion, resistance, and escape SEER training programs developed systematic methods for preparing personnel to maintain military effectiveness under conditions of capture and detention. The technical knowledge displayed by American prisoners influenced post-war military training that emphasized broad-based competence rather than narrow specialization. Military occupational specialty training expanded to include cross-functional skills that enabled personnel to adapt to changing circumstances and maintain operational effectiveness despite equipment loss or command structure disruption. This approach reflected recognition that American military superiority derived from individual competence and cultural values rather than purely technological or numerical advantages. Liberation operations throughout the Pacific demonstrated that prisoner intelligence networks had provided crucial support for American strategic planning. Information collected and preserved by captured personnel enabled precision targeting of Japanese facilities, accurate assessment of enemy capabilities, and effective coordination with local resistance forces. The systematic nature of this intelligence collection suggested organizational capabilities that operated independently of formal command structures and validated broader American military training approaches. The psychological legacy extended beyond military applications to broader recognition of American cultural advantages that had enabled sustained resistance under extreme conditions. Prisoner behavior demonstrated that democratic values, individual initiative, and technical competence created military personnel capable of maintaining effectiveness despite defeat, capture, and brutal treatment. This cultural resilience reflected broader American social development that emphasized education, innovation, and individual responsibility within cooperative frameworks. Japanese military analysts conducting post-war assessments acknowledged that prisoner behavior had provided accurate indicators of broader American military capabilities that proved decisive throughout the Pacific Campaign. The organizational effectiveness, technical competence, and strategic thinking displayed by captured personnel had foreshadowed American tactical and operational advantages that Japanese forces proved unable to counter. This recognition validated American military training approaches that emphasized adaptability and independent thinking over rigid adherence to established procedures. The modern legacy of prisoner resistance appears in current military doctrine that emphasizes network-centric warfare, distributed command structures, and individual initiative within coordinated operations. Contemporary American military training reflects recognition that technological superiority provides advantages only when supported by personnel capable of adapting to changing conditions and maintaining effectiveness despite system failures or command disruption. The ultimate vindication of American prisoner behavior came through the broader Pacific victory that validated their sustained faith in American industrial and military superiority. The prisoners who maintained military organization through 3 years of brutal captivity had correctly assessed that American capabilities would eventually prove decisive against Japanese forces. Their resistance represented not just individual courage, but strategic understanding that American advantages would prevail through systematic application of superior resources, technology, and organizational effectiveness. The story of American prisoner resistance in Japanese camps stands as testament to cultural and military advantages that enabled victory over enemies who had fundamentally misunderstood American character and capability. The systematic underestimation that led Japanese commanders to expect broken individuals instead of organized military units reflected broader strategic failures that proved catastrophic throughout the Pacific Campaign. The prisoners maintained faith in American victory, demonstrated through sustained resistance operations, proved prophetic as American forces systematically defeated Japanese military power across the Pacific theater through application of precisely the superior industrial, technical, and organizational capabilities that captured personnel had never stopped believing would ultimately prevail.